Cheers, Rockets fans. Welcome to The Locker Line, an exclusive podcast from the home of the Rockets.
Whoa!
Sports Talk 790.
Rockets!
The Locker Line is proudly served to you by Carbox Clutch City Lager.
It is good!
Oh, yeah? Red Nation, get ready. Get ready. The Locker Line starts now.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome in to another new episode of The Lager Line, brought to you by Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing. As always, I'm your host, Ben DuBose, editor of USA Today's Rockets Wire and contributor to Sports Talk 790, the official flagship radio station of your Houston Rockets. On today's show, Tuesday night, the opening of training camp for the 2022-23 season. I'm joined by Brian Barefield, who works with me at Rockets Wire and is also a contributor to Sports Talk 790. Brian and I were both at Media Day in Houston yesterday, and Brian today is out in Lake Charles, which is where training camp is taking place for the Rockets the next 3 days. If you're not already following him on Twitter, you should do so at Big Sarge Sports. Sarge, thanks for taking the time. How's Louisiana?
They say if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So I'm just gonna, keep my thoughts about Lake Charles, Louisiana to myself. But you know what? I've met some really nice people here. I guess this is one of those places where you have to be here for a while to get adjusted. But it isn't just some place that I wake up in the morning and tell the wife, "Hey, let's take a trip to Lake Charles."
I get it. And in fairness to Lake Charles, they have been ravaged by a couple of hurricanes the last 2 to 3 years. So that certainly has diminished the community aspect as well. As far as the Rockets, and, when I think of their Louisiana footprint, the first thing I think of is sports gambling. You see the Astros all the time talking about their BetMGM partnerships. We'll see what the Rockets put together because, of course, sports gambling, not legal in Texas. It is legal in Louisiana, and that is an extended market of the team. And to tie it all in with the Rockets kicking off this season, the over-under line for the Rockets, and it varies based on the sports book, but for their wins this season is somewhere 23.5 to 25.5 wins. For perspective, they were 20-62 a year ago. I'm actually bullish on them being over even the 25.5, which is about the highest number I've seen. I think they come in upper 20s to near 30. I'll tell you why in a few minutes, but I'll let you lead off with your thoughts on that. Are you over as well? What are you thinking big picture heading into this season?
Well, I'm definitely thinking that it's going to be over, and I have the Rockets to win in between 34 and 37 games.
Wow, that is bullish. Explain yourself.
Yeah. And the reason why I say that is because some of the games that the Rockets lost last season was due to the defense on the defensive side of the court. And this year, with the addition of Jabari Smith and Tari Eason to go along with Jayshawn Tate and Josh Christopher, it's going to give them a better presence down on the defensive side of the ball. Whereas last year, even though they were very young, they also were deficient on the defensive end. If Christian Wood patrolling the paint, he's not that type of defender to be able to control the paint like that. So if Jalen Green got beat off the dribble, or if KPJ got beat off the dribble, there was no one behind him to protect the rim. Well, this year, and I know they're going to take their lumps because they are young, but you have two defenders in the rookies, like I mentioned, Jabari Smith and Tari Eason, whose mindset is a defensive mindset. They actually take pleasure in playing defense. And so now when you have that on the back end, you can take a little bit more chances on the front end. So now you can get a little bit more riskier with Kevin Porter and Jalen Green trying to get those steals and get out in transition. You got a young team who wants to run. And so when you have that, and with Alperen Şengün being on the floor with those two as well, Alperen is one of those guys who he fits right in and he goes with the flow of everything that's going on. And so if he see these two guys dialed in, or if, when Jayshawn's out there on the floor and he's dialed in to playing defense, then that mindset is going to carry over, and Alpy is going to start playing a little bit better. And the year of playing, this summer of him playing
Mm-hmm.
in Euro basketball, that also helped him out a lot. So what he used was what he learned from there and bringing it back and combining it with the year that he had in the NBA. I think that that's why they're going to win a little more games. On the offensive side of the ball, they're already talented, and you have guys who can score, and you have a young team that's going to run. I always look at them. I look at them as a team who they're a young team who sometimes they don't know that they're not supposed to, they don't fear anyone on the court. They don't know that they're not supposed to be in games. All they know is what they're doing is playing basketball, something they've done their whole lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, once they step on the court, yes, they know they're going up against a LeBron James, a Steph Curry, Giannis, KD. They know they're going up against those guys, but to them, it's just basketball. And now that I feel like with the continuity, the comfortability, and the fact that Steven Silas is going to finally be able to implement his entire plan because there is no adversity, there is no turmoil coming into the season. I feel like they're going to have more wins than those. They're going to have a lot more wins than what they had the last 2 years. Because I know I said 34-37, and you're like, Sarge, like that's the combined two totals of their wins of the
Yeah.
last two seasons.
And we should acknowledge that these relatively rosy projections about relative health, in that, sure, you're going to have some turned ankles from time to time, but nothing like a torn ACL for Kevin Porter Jr. or Jalen Green, something that would just radically transform the season. That goes without saying. That would dramatically reduce your expected output as far as wins. But the reason that I would go above the mid-20s win totals as well, people are underselling the importance of continuity. Obviously, the first year of Steven Silas, as you alluded to, really that was the James Harden exit year that drug on into the season because the Rockets thought it was better for negotiations. That put a cloud over that entire season. And they really didn't start to get to the other side until that 2021 draft class headlined by Jalen Green and Alperen Şengün. But even last year, that team was so new. You had the foundational pieces that were rookies, their first taste of NBA basketball. You had Kevin Porter Jr. playing point guard for the first time. Even in the front court, where you had Christian Wood returning, you had him in a brand new role. In the first 20 games, you were trying this double big lineup with Daniel Tice. There were so many changes, as opposed to this season when there's all this continuity. There was a video that the team posted on Twitter earlier tonight of Steven Silas addressing the team after today's practice. We'll get to your insights because I know they let the media see a little bit at the end. But Steven Silas told the team that it was the best day one that he had ever seen. And that's high praise because Steven's been doing this when you count both his head coaching experience with the Rockets and all the assistant jobs he's had, including some really good stops like the Cavaliers and LeBron James, the Warriors with Steph Curry, the Mavs with Luka. He's been doing this for 20 years. He said this was the best day one. And the biggest reason for that is the continuity. It is, by and large, a similar group to what they had a year ago. Now, you are adding Jabari Smith and Tari Eason, but by and large, the core is back. They've been working out together during the offseason. So I do think that there's going to be some synergies in terms of what Steven Silas can do and the expected output from the team because they are used to one another. And so they can put more layers into the playbook because the chemistry is going to be better than what we've seen the last 2 years. These guys actually know each other. They've been working out. And even relative to other NBA teams that Silas has worked with, he says that this day one was the best. That speaks to how familiar they are with each other. And that's really the complete opposite of the last two seasons, well, most of it at least, when the team just basically didn't know each other. They were just starting to get this learning process and integration going. So there's a pretty big organic advantage. And then the other part of it that I see too is that the Western Conference has really changed this offseason. The last couple of
Yes.
years, when you look at sort of the tanking landscape, there were a few other rebuilding teams, sure, but a lot of them were in the East, who you only play twice a year. Teams like Orlando, Detroit, Indiana. Now you're seeing the balance tilt the other way, which it inevitably does. And San Antonio, Utah, they've sold off in the offseason. They're clearly entering tank mode, trying to do what the Rockets did a couple of years ago. Oklahoma City, I won't say that they were ever fully out of tank mode, but they're out outlook has dramatically worsened in recent weeks with Chet Holmgren already done for the season and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, far and away the best player. He's out for the start of training camp and nobody knows when he's going to be back. So I think Oklahoma City may take a step back even relative to a year ago. And so that's 3 teams already between the Spurs, the Jazz, the Thunder that are going to be bad. And I'm not saying the Rockets are going to be good, but it's actually very different than a year ago when really there was the Rockets, I guess the Thunder, and literally every other team in the West was trying to win. Whereas now this offseason, you are seeing other teams in the West, the teams you play usually 4 times each, go down the rebuilding path. So there's more wins to take. And yet the Rockets do have more continuity together. These young players are going to improve, as you said. And then the final point, Stephen Silas himself. This is year 3 of a 4-year contract. The 4th year isn't even fully guaranteed, according to reports. I believe Kelly Iko had that detail. So Stephen is going to be coaching this year for his 2nd contract to prove to the Rockets that he is the guy to lead the 2nd phase of this rebuild as they try to contend the next few years once they have cap room. So Stephen is going to be very incentivized to sort of put the pedal to the metal, get as many wins as he can to show Tillman Fertitta, Patrick Fertitta, Rafael Stone, hey, I'm the guy. My system is working. So the team is energized. They're together. I don't think Stephen Silas would say what he said about this being his best day one very lightly. And then you combine it with the obvious incentive that Stephen Silas has to get the best out of them, and all in a Western Conference where the supporting cast in terms of teams is getting weaker. To me, this sort of adds up to, assuming health, the Rockets can surprise to the upside. And go ahead, Sarge.
Oh no, I was just going to add in that you also cannot underestimate the value of what Stephen Silas and General Manager Rafael Stone did this summer by going out and getting Lionel Hollins. Now, if you remember when the last championship that the Los Angeles Lakers won, and I know that people will call it the bubble championship or the Disney championship, but if you look along that bench, the coaches that were on that bench, the assistant coaches were on that bench that included Lionel Hollins, that included Jason Kidd and others. Going out and getting a defensive-minded coach like Lionel Hollins, going out and getting Hollins who has a footprint in the NBA, and someone that these players can look at and respect because of his resume. Now you do that, and you bring along G League Coach of the Year in Mahmoud. I'm sorry, I have a hard time pronouncing his name, but you bring him into the fold as well. So the assistant coaches that Coach Silas has added to the bench will only help these younger players develop and get better. But their Lionel Hollins is going to be a change as far as the Houston Rockets are concerned. And as the defensive president, as I keep preaching over and over again, it's going to be a change on that defensive side of the ball.
As far as the offense goes, I think the biggest variable that people might be underselling is Kevin Porter Jr. And I made this point in my last podcast, which was a solo edition leading into training camp, about how certainly KPJ wants to carry over those last 7 games when I think he averaged like 29 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds per game on really good efficiency too. Shot like 48% from the field, 40% on threes. But what makes me think that at least some of it can be carried over beyond just the obvious elements of maturity. He's entering year 4, which is when guys start to get closer to their peak, their developmental cycles. He's 22 years old now. He had a full off season. He's distanced himself from the problems he had off the court in Cleveland. I also think he said something at media day that fed into my theory before camp, that he's just more comfortable. And I think that comfort honestly started at the end of last year, in large part because he felt like for the first time that was his team. Because in those final 7 games, you know who wasn't playing, Sarge? Christian Wood, Eric Gordon, and Dennis Schroeder, the 3 veterans. Now, 2 of those are
Yes.
gone. Eric Gordon will be back, although it remains to be seen whether Eric Gordon or Jayshawn Tate is the 5th starter. It's possible Eric isn't even starting, to be determined on that. But I think really Kevin felt like that was his team. And so much of his first year at point guard, it's sort of feeling out, when do I facilitate? When do I defer? When do I try to take over with my gifts as a scorer and as an attacker? And when it was really that young group at the end of the year, he felt more comfortable in his own skin, that this is my group And so I'm going to lead the way. And it just led to what, to me, didn't look just like a hot streak. It looked like just a more comfortable overall player. And this year, think about this, Sarge. If Jayshawn Tate starts over Eric Gordon, which is entirely possible, Kevin Porter Jr. could be the most experienced NBA player in your starting lineup because Jalen Green and Şengün are year 2, Jabari is year 1, and Jayshawn Tate, even though he's older in age, Jayshawn Tate would be year 3. So it's possible KPJ is your most experienced starter this year. I think, he's talked about his journey on a personal level a lot, but I also think what he said at Media Day yesterday, when you asked him about sort of his journey as a point guard. And he talked about how it's not just about him, but he has to earn the respect of the men that he's playing with, because the point guard position is about leadership and trying to get those other 4 players to follow him. I think to some degree early on, when he was a 21-year-old kid who, by the way, didn't even really play that much in his second NBA season because of a lot of the off-court concerns. If you remember, the Rockets sent him to the G League for about 6 weeks before even bringing him up. And I think a lot of his third season, he was sort of caught in, well, number one, he had some injury issues with that quad, really the first half of the year, that never went away. And I think just mentally, he was sort of caught between when do I be aggressive and when do I show my point guard skills, because that's what the Rockets want me to do. Whereas now, I feel like that this is his team. Certainly, he's not alone. I think Jalen Green is going to get the majority of the headlines because he's perhaps alongside Jabari Smith, your top blue chip prospect, and Jalen a year ahead, of course, so he's getting most of the headlines. But honestly, KPJ entering year 4, I think there's a good argument to be made that he's your best player entering the season, and it's it's on him to basically have that swagger, to walk with that confidence that this is my team, that I can be that kind of player and lead. That's the way he talked, in my opinion, throughout the offseason. He seemed more mature in his interviews. I think a lot of people got that from watching his media day session on Monday. And it sounds like, from what I've seen of people and heard from people who watched day 1 at camp today, that vibe sort of carried over into Lake Charles. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. So, but before I talk about day 1 training camp, from what I seen today here in Lake Charles at McNeese State, what I don't want to get lost in translation is the fact that Kevin Porter Jr. has matured. When he walked into that media conference room on yesterday, he walked in a totally different person than he did a year prior to that. He walked in a totally different person than he did when he first got to the Rockets. You could just see that something about him has changed. And the reason why I say I don't want the maturity aspect to get, or the maturity narrative to get lost in translation, is because a lot of people are going to look at it and say, if he starts off great, or if he has an outstanding season, people are going to say, well, he's only playing good because he's up for a contract extension. And I don't think that that's the case.
No.
I honestly and truly believe that the case for Kevin Porter Jr. is, finally, I'm at a place in my life where I am happy. Finally, I'm at a place in my life where I'm comfortable. Finally, I'm in a place in my life where I'm accepting people into my life. One of the biggest issues and problems that Kevin Porter Jr. had early on in his NBA career was he wasn't accepting people into his life. His mindset was, I have to handle every problem that I have and the others around me. I have to handle that. And my personal problems, I'm the only one that can take care of those. Where now you can see where he's starting to allow people into his life, and that helps him out a lot. He's realizing that some of that pressure that he had in his personal life and off the court, that's some of the things that once he allows people in, they can work on these issues and these problems together. And now that translates back onto the court. Like you said, like you mentioned, those last 7 games, Kevin Porter Jr. was one of those guys where you're saying to yourself, wow, I'm looking at a potential all-star here. I'm looking at a guy who could be a potential all-star. And you pair him with his backcourt mate in Jalen Green, and they could be a dangerous 1-2 combo. Another thing that people missed during his last 7 games, he only averaged 3 turnovers a game during his last 7 games. And that means a lot from a guy who had a shoot-first mentality, being a shooting guard, having his position change and going to a point guard position where now he has to facilitate and get everybody involved. And the one thing that I like about what he's doing or what he can do, looking at that sample size of those 7 games, is I know how to get everybody else involved, including myself. And I'm not here to be the man, but just my play is showing that I can be the man next to the guy who is the man, and Jalen Green. Their chemistry that they have together, what they do together, and I'm talking about on the court and off the court. If you look at their social media and me being able to talk to them offline, talk to them in the off season, like those guys, the only thing that was on their mind was to get better, to get better, to get better. Because you have that young mindset of they don't want to keep hearing how bad their team is. They don't want to keep hearing how bad the Rockets are going to be. They don't want to finish at the bottom of the NBA standings anymore. They take pride in that type of stuff because in this social media era that we're in, you're going to see that all the time. They're going to see the things that are the things that are going to be spewed about them, the things that are going to be typed about them. They watch these shows, these NBA shows as well, and so they take pride in saying, "No, I don't want to be that way." And transitioning over into day one, Ben, they opened up they allowed us onto the practice court today towards the end of practice, and we got a chance to view maybe like the last 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we walked in, the first voice I heard was rookie Jabari Smith Jr. saying,
Ooh.
"Hey, I thought this was supposed to be the NBA. We ain't playing like it. I thought this was supposed to be the NBA. You better give me more effort than that." And so I asked him about that at the end of practice during his press availability, and he said, "I learned at an early age that my age doesn't matter. My presence on the court, my play on the court, that's what matters. So I'm not afraid to be a vocal leader. I'm not afraid to say things." And when he said that, it wasn't like he got any pushback of "Be quiet, Ricky," or "Don't say nothing. You're just a rookie." The people that was on his team was like, "You know what? He got a point," and it picked up from there. So that's one of the things that I noticed today. Just the first day of training camp, I also noticed that. Jalen Green, we're going to talk a lot about him this season, Ben. I understand that. We're going to talk about him. We're going to write a lot about him. We're going to put a lot of social media posts up about him because, I mean, in all honesty, at this point, Jalen is the man.
Yep.
His play after the All-Star break, showed that he is ready to, take that next step in moving towards being the leader of this team. But that's not, last year doesn't impress me as far as what I'm about to say now. Like that showed me what he can do. I am more enamored, Ben, by his work ethic. Here's a guy who went through an entire practice. They did their conditioning test today, meaning that they had to pass a conditioning test, or Coach Silas really wasn't going to let them get on the court. And everybody had to pass it. And if everybody didn't pass it, then Coach Silas was going to probably make the entire team, I don't want to say suffer, but he's going to make the entire team do it until they got it together because he's teaching them that cohesive unit. So here's a guy who went through that training that everybody that we asked about that training test, they were like, wow, it was a hard one, but we all made it through. So you have that, then you go through practice. Being at the end of practice, you have him, the very first thing that he does as soon as they break, he seeks out John Lucas and he says, "Let's shoot." He seeks out assistant coach John Lucas and say, "Hey, I'm ready to put up some shots." And that's what he starts doing. He starts putting up shots. Coach Lucas is coaching him, telling him different types of things on where he's going wrong, and then making the adjustments. And he just kept going and kept going and kept going. So that's what I like, and that's one of the things that I took away. Two of the things that I took away from training camp today.
And I actually think that dynamic between Jalen and Jabari, or not really the dynamic, but the contrast in their personalities, is something that's really, in my opinion, it's a key variable moving forward. With Jalen, he's certainly a nice guy with the media, but he's not the most talkative. I think he's a little bit guarded. On the court, he does his business, but he's not the most vocal. Yet Jabari, with the media. We saw him at media day. He can talk for hours. That guy,
Yes.
he is a talker. He is engaging. He is on the court as well. And I think that's a good balance. Not saying that Jalen at 20 years old is who he's going to be the rest of his career. Guys grow in a lot of areas, including their personalities. But right now, Jalen's a little bit on the quiet side, both on the court and with the media. Jabari is sort of the opposite. And to me, that sort of makes them a pretty good blend in that, not that everybody has to be talkative. The example I always give, Tim Duncan's one of the 10 greatest players in NBA history. And people
Yes.
early in his career tried to say, oh, he's not vocal enough. Well, it doesn't really matter. You lead by example. You go out and do your job, and everybody's going to follow. At the end of the day, that's what matters. But there are some ways that communication matters, both on and off the court. And I don't want to say that it's a weakness for Jalen. He's just a little quiet, I would say, at least with the media. And his interviews can be a little bit short. Whereas Jabari, again, he's just a talker. In a lot of ways, he's very engaging. He's, I think, a leader by nature. And at least early in their careers, it sort of works out well because it lets Jalen play to his strengths. And then Jabari can focus on, in many ways, leading. We heard him say at Media Day, will to win. And so when I look at those two personalities, they actually seem to go pretty well together in that as they grow, again, I don't want to pigeonhole Jalen because he's very young. It's possible that he develops into more of a leader and a communicator as his years progress. But right now, it feels like Jalen's kind of a good contrast for him. Is that fair? Or that
Oh
Jabari's
yeah.
a good contrast for him?
Oh yes, definitely a good contrast for him. I definitely see that chemistry growing together, and the more they play, the more time that they have on the court, the more they can get that continuity, which we spoke about earlier. Oh, it's going to be. I think that it's going to be something that, like Coach Silas says, the league is going to have to look out for them, and
Yep.
it's one of those things, Ben, where these two guys they aren't just guys who you look at from the outside and say, this is what they could be. No, these are two guys who went top five back to back. Top five in the NBA draft in back to back years, and so there has to be some type of talent there. And these are just two guys who. The one thing that I've noticed about the Rockets, especially from the off season and even leading up to today, is a lot of what they do rubs off on each other in a very friendly, competitive type of way. They don't want one person to outwork the other. And so you
Mm-hmm.
see, like I just talked about, when Jalen Green was on one side of the court getting up shots with John Lucas, on the opposite side of the court was Kevin Porter Jr. and Tari Eason getting up shots. Then you have Ty Washington getting up
Mm-hmm.
shots. Alper and Shingun going over some low post stuff. Usman Garuba, before he came over to talk to us today, getting some more information on what to do as far as practice is concerned, on how he can add to the team, add more value to the team, which he talked about earlier today. And so these guys are looking at each other and they're saying, I don't want to be that guy to let this team down. That seems like what the mantra is. That seems what the mindset is that I don't want to be the guy that doesn't put in enough work. I don't want to be the guy who does not listen in practice. I don't want to be the guy who's not doing his job in order to make this team successful.
The last point I wanted to get to, and then I'll let you start filing stories because I know you've got a lot to write about from today. The storyline that's going to play out in preseason and exhibition play, as far as, I guess, on-court questions, we still don't know who that fifth starter is between Jayshawn Tate and Eric Gordon. I did ask Tate at Media Day about something Silas said during the offseason about him playing well with Alper and Şengün since opposing defenses can't put the 5 on Tate in that configuration since Alp is so physical. He agreed with that. Of course, opposing defenses dropping the 5 against Şengün and basically playing 4 on 5 because Tate doesn't want to shoot that 3, at least when he's not in the corners. That's kind of clogged the Rockets the last couple of years. That's tougher. He also pointed out that Şengün is a much better passer than any big man he's really played with. And with Tate being a good off-ball cutter, that could play well together. Yet Eric is the veteran. He's clearly a floor spacer. Have you gotten much of a sense yet, Jayshawn and Eric, which way they might be leaning? Is there any sort of early indications who was playing with the ones today?
There was no early indication, and when we got into, a time we were allowed access into the gym, the teams were mixed, and so it
Gotcha.
looked like what could have been the ones may not have been the ones.
Mm.
We actually don't know. We just seen a group together that looked like they, like I said, it looks like they could be the one. So I don't want to say what group it was, and because I don't want to speculate.
Hmm.
But if I had to give an educated guess, I'm looking at Eric Gordon as that fifth starter,
Okay.
and
Tate off the bench.
yeah, definitely take off the bench because when you have, athletic guards like KPJ and Jalen, and then you have that backside of Alperin and Jabari. And Jabari, by the way, one of the big men coming into this league that can shoot. I think that yesterday he told us he shot 43% from 3-point range and gave the little wink when he was asked the
Yeah.
question about his shooting. You have that. Eric Gordon is that stabilizer. Eric Gordon
Mm.
is a person that, even though he doesn't have as quick a first step as he used to have, he may not be as athletic as he used to be. One thing that Eric Gordon can do is shoot, and so Kevin Porter and Jalen are going to open up the floor for him a lot because people are going to pack the paint to try to keep those guys out, and the drive and kick that both of those guys have worked on, Eric is going to benefit from that a lot. I think that if you put Jayshawn Tate on the floor, a person who can shoot the ball but doesn't shoot it as effectively as Eric Gordon does, then you kind of handicap yourself on that offensive side of the ball because now there's like, well, we don't have to really play this guy because he's not as effective as Eric is. And,
Hmm.
all it's going to take is a couple of those, Eric to hit a couple of those 3-pointers, and that changes the whole trajectory of the defense because now you have to get somebody out there on him. And now that opens up the other side of the court, maybe for a driving lane for Jalen, or, opens up another shooting avenue for Jabari Smith. So having Eric on the floor, and he's a veteran. I mean, he is a
Hmm.
veteran. He's smart. He's savvy. And even at this age and even at this point of his career, he doesn't play bad defense.
Not at all.
We noticed last year. He's also a guy who isn't afraid to go down and hold post players. He's not afraid to get into the post and mix it up with some of these bigger guys. By using his strength and his leverage and the way that he's able to use his lower body. So having him on the floor is definitely going to help out their starting unit. That's why I see him as the fifth starter.
That's fair. And I'll end this podcast by bringing it full circle back to what we talked about at the beginning with some of the expectations for wins this season, assuming relative health. Last year, if you throw out that 1-16 start, which I agree you probably should because the spacing with Wood and Tice was just absolutely terrible. It was also Jalen, Josh, Alperen Şengün playing NBA basketball for the first time. If you toss out that 1-16 start and focus on the final 65 games of the year, when Eric Gordon played, they were 18-25. You know
Mm-hmm.
what that win percentage is extrapolated for a full season?
What is it?
Well, it's 34.3 wins. So to what you were saying,
Oh,
so to what you were saying earlier, it might sound silly to say the Rockets after going 20-62 can have such a big increase, but really, if you throw out that terrible start last year and you focus on when Gordon played, they actually were at that pace for 43 games last year, and that's why they kept him. That's why Eric Gordon does, even at 33 years old, still contribute to winning. The values he has as a floor spacer, as a defender, and whether he comes off the bench, whether he starts, he's certainly going to be a key role. And that's just sort of the little under the hood thing you can point to that I think people from the outside are going to say, look, they won 20 games last year. Why would they win at most more than 3 to 5 more, especially after trading Christian Wood, who on the outside, that was probably the most recognizable player, at least playing player a year ago, not counting John Wall since he never participated. But internally, that's the kind of thing that can give you some hope. And that's why Rockets fans are excited. And that's why Steven Silas, well, I'm guessing it's at least part of it, called today the best day one of training camp of his 20 plus years in the NBA, which is quite a statement. With
yes.
that, we will draw this to a close. Folks, if you want more from Brian, which I think you absolutely should, you can follow his work at RocketsWire, rocketswire.usatoday.com. And Big Sarge Sports on Twitter is where you can follow him there. Got all sorts of great content. Big Sarge Sports with a Z, I should point out. And that's how you can get live coverage from Lake Charles and throughout the preseason and upcoming season. It all starts with the exhibition opener on Sunday at Toyota Center. Sarge, thanks so much for the time. Enjoy the rest of your couple of days in Louisiana, my friend.
Hey, thank you, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. That'll do it for this episode of The Lager Line, brought to you by Clutch City Lager of Carbach Brewing. I want to thank our friends at Sports Talk 790 for their support as well. For Brian Barefield, I'm Ben DuBose. Thanks as always for listening, and please come back soon for another new episode of The Lager Line.